Welcome. We got a little treat for you today. Myself, the Soulfessor, Mr. Marcellus Williams, and my coach, and actually Marcellus' coach as well, Brad Couillard. We teamed up together and we did a little Q&A. If you follow on Instagram as well, we put a poll up or a question box up to be able to submit questions, and we picked the ones that we really thought would be the most benefit and maybe we haven't covered before, and really dove into them. And we've got part of it on my channel, the video you're watching right now, and then the other half on Marcellus's. So I'll make sure to link that below and make sure to go watch that if you want the totality of the Q&A. So within that too, a lot of you may not be as active on Instagram. If you haven't seen, Marcellus, Brad, and I are going to be hosting an event at Corrupted Strength, Russ Orhey's gym, on September 25th. And it's a really cool event. It's a seminar, but what we're really trying to do is kind of elevate what is a seminar. Typically seminars are just talking throughout the day, maybe a little technique analysis, but we really want to bring a true experience to the powerlifting community. So you're going to have me, Brad, Marcellus, and actually a guest presenter, Derek Cunye, presenting on different topics. I'll be talking about high frequency benching. Brad's going to be talking about defining good technique. Marcellus talking about accessory movement programming within powerlifting, and then Derek talking about kind of the rehab side of things. But within that too, we're going to be having some of the best lifters from across the country coming out. People like Bob Matthews, Ashton Roska, Sean Noriega, Jasmine Penn, Gabby Martinez. I mean, the list goes on. I think we have 18 to 19 of some of the best lifters in the country coming out that you can interact with. You can be able to hang out throughout the day. They're going to be doing exhibition events such as Tandem Deadlift, which is sponsored by 110%. We've got the Bench Press for Reps, sponsored by A7. And then we have the Pause Squat for Time, sponsored by Squat to Depth Apparel. And those pros are going to be competing in those, be able to put on a show for everyone. We're going to have a Lift with the Pros session where everyone can be able to lift together at the end of the day, free catered lunch, free GBT collab shirt that's going to be coming with it. We're going to be having a Q&A with the pros. We're going to be having this live stream, a lot of cool stuff to really just kind of create a true experience for the powerlifting fanatic, where not only can you get some great information from coaches, but you can also be able to hang out, experience something that a lot of times most people aren't going to be able to do by getting all of the best lifters together in one area, and having a pretty unique experience, being able to interact with them, because it's the cap is 60 entries. We're going to be having almost 20 pros, but we're only have 60 people attending. So registration is still available. It's going to be closing August 27th, and then we're going to go from there. So I'm going to put the link down in the description box below if you're interested in attending that. Again, it's going to be on September 25th from, I believe, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. at Corrupted Summit down in Houston, Texas, and we'd love for you to attend. But otherwise, you're here for the video. You're here for some question and answers and to get some knowledge. We're talking on this video about, I think we're talking about ascending sets, talking about some of the biggest unexpected coaching lessons we learned, talking about squat frequency, and some other awesome topics. So without further ado, here's the Q&A.
All right. Marcellus, how would you go about programming ascending sets? I'll make it's a broad one, so I'll say, give me one. Why, like, in what instances of where, like, I think ascending sets, how to program them is, I don't want to say it's simple, but like your ascending work. Like, what instances and why would you be programming ascending sets?
Got you. Okay, so there's a couple of reasons. One can be if I'm trying to get a client to have a little bit of additional workload, but not so much where I think it's overly fatiguing, then that's when I like ascending sets. I'm sure we all have those clients where it's like, they work up to their top set. The top set goes really, really well. You give them back down volume after that, even if it's super submax, and they're wrecked on it. They just don't feel good. They don't perform very well with it because after hitting like that top set in, they don't recover as well for whatever reason. I like using ascending sets in that case. I have a client named Kelly, for example, on her secondary deadlift day. What we found was whenever we work up to like on her primary day, if she hit her top set and then her back down, she's fine. But on the secondary day, after she worked up to her top sets, she just kind of gasped. By the time she gets to those back downs, we're not quite getting the quality we want out of it. So instead, we switched her to ascending sets. So, like ascending sets of 5, 6, whatever it may be, up to an assigned RPE. And that way, we're kind of getting in a little bit of that additional volume through the ascending sets. But once they hit that higher end threshold, whatever the exertion is that's set for the day, then she's good to go. We kind of get that quality there. So that's one reason that I like to do it. Another one is just sometimes just skill practice, really kind of like grooving the pattern a little bit more and kind of helping the lifter learn to kind of gauge their RPEs better. Sometimes a client might let's say they have a top set of 3 or 4, but they're just doing singles or doubles to warm up. and they're like, oh, this warm up felt really good for single. So then they kind of jumped the gun, got aggressive with their next, load attempt, and it ends up being overshot. So having them be like, okay, you have a top set of 4 at this RP. Now you have to do build up sets of 4 for every warm until you get there, kind of helps them get a better gauge for their body and kind of move the movement pattern a little bit better as well.
So I could probably go on for too long about all the reasons, because I think there's so many reasons why to do ascending sets, and I think they're a fantastic tool. To add a couple to it, and I'll try and ramble them off quick. One, someone who is time limited. It could be on certain days they're time limited, but if you're doing ascending sets, that tends to allow them to be able to kind of work up to their top set, get it done, get in and out in quicker. Two, you're talking a little bit about top set and then not feeling recovered. I see a lot, and I think there's a lot of the people, it's I don't know if it's recovery. I think it's a lot of times like a mental drain and letdown. They put all of their energy into that top set, and so by doing ascending sets, I can get them to have better quality work, aka a better average intensity of their entire workout, which then increases total stress for the day. You have some people who just suck at warming up. Like, they don't do anything. They get into the bar, they do 135, they do 225, and then boom, they're ready to do their working sets with 315. And then they said, oh, I felt like crap on my top set, but once I got my working set or my back downs, they started to feel better. Well, they probably just weren't warming up enough. All right, I'm going to force them to warm up. Another way, you already said it, for gauging RPE. And yeah, I'm blanking on some other ones. I could keep going on forever. I'll let Brad go, because you probably are thinking of a couple that I haven't said.
I mean, I basically use them primarily on secondary days, just in general, like where I place them. I typically reserve the top set back down approach for primary days, just because of the nature of what competition is like. And just, I like a little bit more of a polarizing effect on that primary day as opposed to like a secondary day. But yes, basically to dampen output a bit. So, if I'm thinking like over a structure of like 12 weeks, I might do like ascending, like true ascending work, 5, 6, 7 or 6, 7, 8. Up until, maybe that, 4 weeks, I might go into something more of like a top set approach on that secondary day, just to get a little bit more practice from that concept, as well as just kind of still giving a little bit of a polarizing effect for that rep range or that intensity. But I mean, I think you can go from, it's not necessarily true 5, 6, 7. You could go 5, 6 and then drop, 5, 10%, whatever. But I think there's a lot of different strategies, like Steve said. I mean, you can go on and on. The combinations of intensity adjustments and RPE configurations that you want out of it are endless. So it's just a matter of what you're doing.
Yep. An example within that too is they asked about how do you program them. Is the obvious one is, let's say we're doing sets of 5 and we're just going to send up 6, 7, 8 RPE. It could be descending volume. It could be 5, 4, 3, 6, 7, 8. It could be ascending volume where you do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 RPE, but it's the same weight every single time. You're just adding a rep each time. There's so many different ways you can actually do ascending sets. I'm really big on doing like a top rep set and then doing a single, because way too often people prioritize and put all their energy into their single, and then their rep work sucks from it. So I'll a lot of times ascend into the single by doing like 2 or 3 ascending rep sets, and then ascend into their literal last set of the day is their single, and you'll find that all of a sudden they can do all these sets magically well, versus if I do the reverse order, their single goes great and everything else goes to crap. So it's a lot of ways you can do it.
One more thing I will throw in there too is I like using, if I've increased someone's frequency on a lift. So if we go say 3 times a week to 4 times a week, I sometimes like to start with having each like an ascending set to kind of gauge what their work capacity is like with that extra bench day, and then from there I can decide if I want to give them more like straight sets, drop backs, etc. But I find that it's just not increasing too much too quickly when you do it that way.
I'll give one more too, because again, there's so many ways you can do this. You can change the ascending work as you go through a block. You could have 4 ascending sets week 1, 3 ascending sets and a back off week 2, 2 ascending sets, 2 back off, and you can change and or even like one block is ascending sets, and you're increasing average intensity and stress and masking top end strength. And then the next block you pull off ascending sets and you do a top set approach model to kind of work on peak strength. I do that a lot with bench press in particular. Like, let's push some high stress and high exertion and average intensity to kind of create the adaptations. So a lot of people can kind of tend to I don't say overreach, but like push bench and not kind of tank from it, and then pull back off of that and go to a top set back off approach, more care about peak intensity, and then we see kind of the output raise up there. So we probably, again, we've all said it, we probably could all make 2-hour video on ascending sets, because there's so many ways to utilize them. So Brad, I'll move on to you. What's the most common frequency you see with each style of comp lift?
2 to 3 on the squat, 1 to 2 on the deadlift, and then bench. I mean, bench has such a wide range. But I even think that the people that can tolerate, lower frequency overall could still handle about 4 on average. But typically like 3 to 5. Obviously there's the exceptions to the norm of 6 to 7 week. What's Sean up to now? 6?
Bench?
5 or 6,
Yeah,
right?
6.
Yeah. Okay, so 6 is towards that top end range there, but yeah, anywhere between I think 3 to 5 is the most comfortable for bench press that I've seen. So, I mean,
I'll throw one thing out and you tell me if you agree or not, because I think we're all going to agree on that thing. Of those things, I have an opinion that I think too many people try and squat 3 days a week and think it's going to be magical, just like increasing bench press frequency. Increasing bench press frequency is not the same as increasing squat frequency in like the magic pill of it. I think way too many people squat 3 days a week and they should not be.
absolutely agreed.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart.
Not at all. Like, and it's funny because I found that a lot of my clients, they keep week, got to a point where they doing better off 2 days a week, especially as they got stronger. Like I do have some lifters, right? Like I use my client Derek for example, where like he's a big squatter and he has his primary and secondary squat day. We did recently give him a third squat day, but it's like a 3x3, but I'm talking like 60%.
Yep.
It really helps him feel a better groove for his primary squat day. That's it. But as far as like pushing extensively high volume 3 days a week, I find for most people it's just really not necessary. I'm also big on less is more, milk less for as long as you can. And then oftentimes for my clients who do have that third squat day, it's something that it's just a super submax priming day, or it's like a variation like SSB, something of that nature. But I definitely think that way more people would do well on twice a week squatting, and they don't even realize it.
Small off.
Yeah,
face mess up.
To go with the squatting part, you guys can tell me if you've done something different. I still to this day don't think I've ever programmed a third squat day to be intensive in any way.
No.
It's always super submax. And I think where, again, I'm going to where people are going wrong is they're adding a third squat day, yet they're doing no accessory movements for lower body.
Yep.
Like, there is such low-hanging fruit there of like, if you add a third squat day, that's more fatigue carryover to deadlift. Like, that's more low back intensity. I mean, low back intensive work. Like, we could be doing belt squats or pendulum or hack squats or something like that and getting direct leg work, which I'm going to say for the majority of powerlifters, barring they're doing lower body accessory work, they're probably not actually targeting their legs enough because, I mean, barring your Connor Borker, even he probably still does accessory work, and you have super short femurs, or I have Lorenzo. Lorenzo doesn't do a lot of accessory stuff. Like the squat isn't always the best quad builder. It's a great quad builder, but that alone isn't just a great quad builder. It tends to take a little bit more than that. So yeah, you should be. I mean, you all may have done the strategy too. Maybe the third squat day is belt squats.
Yeah, I've done that. I've had a lot of clients who do that. Actually, I would even say that logic even applies to bench to a certain degree. I have clients, they come to me, maybe they're just benching, they were benching like 2 times a week before they came to me. They come to me, we start 3 times a week, and things are going decent. When they're like, oh, should we go to 4? And I'm like, let's get you stronger on something first, and then do that. Like, and the progress you can make off that is great, and you milk that. And then once you get to that point, cool, now you have that 4th day still in your back pocket.
Yep.
Well, especially with the bench, if you run something for long enough, like you go from 3 to 4 days a week, you're running for long enough, it's very, very difficult to go backwards from there at that point and make the same progress. So that's why try to milk what you can for as long as you can.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with everything you guys are saying. It's you can do, like, especially for squat. I mean, 3x squat is definitely taxing. As somebody that's came from the traditional, DUP model and being able to handle a 3x8, 4x4, or 3x6, 4x4, across every week with an AMRAP at the end of the week. It is not something you can maintain from a standpoint of like intensity across the whole week. It definitely needs a bridge, so to speak, like you mentioned, Marcellus, so like a 3x3, like super light, just to kind of bridge the fact that you're, squatting, 4 days apart on the main days, secondary and primary days. The accessory work, I mean, you can utilize what Steve talked about, is just utilizing accessory work to support, hypertrophy growth within the specific isolated tissues, whether that's, a pendulum, a hack, a belt, leg extension, leg curls, stuff like that, and be fine, right? Because it's just about managing stress across the whole week. So if you're adding that in there for specific purposes, great. I think that's a great idea for some that wants to be, needs a little bit more comp specificity going into a prep or something like that. But obviously, other things need to drop out and be more strategic with accessory work, like Bulgarians or what have you, on where they're placed, so that you are not just just tanking everything at that point, because it is not it's tough.
So a question that was coming up, and I'm just going to start with it now. It wasn't necessarily my question, but it fits into this, so it would be silly to have to come back around to it. What would a 3-day-a-week squat layout look like? And we've already kind of alluding to it. That third squat day, I think all three of us agree, is not going to be intensive. And there's two main things I'm looking at, or three main things. Well, two. Is that day needing to be more skill practice based or more filling a volume gap? And then within that, what does the lifter tend to get beat up more from? Volume, like higher rep work, or lower rep work? Because that's going to answer all the questions I want. Usually, if you're doing technique-based stuff, it's going to probably bar towards the lower end of the rep schemes, because we're wanting to have a little bit more skill practice towards maintaining position that's a bit more specific to what we do. But at the same time, maybe you have a lifter that, like, if you're going to work up to any, like even like low RPEs, but maybe three sets of 3 at 70%, like beats them up compared to doing sets of 7 at 60%. So there's not a right answer there, but those are the things I'm looking at: technique versus voluminous, and then how does the lifter respond and recover based off of intensity versus volume, which some of that comes back to distance traveled. I think some of that's sex related, male versus women. I would say I have more women who are doing higher volume tertiary days and more men doing lower rep tertiary days. You both are shaking your head, so I think we're on the same thing there. And that comes a lot back just to distance travel. I mean, women tend to be shorter, they're handling lower loads, all that kind of stuff, and they usually just tend to need more volume. So that's generally how I'm going to set up a third day. And this is going with a question we just had. A lot of times, just sending sets on that. I would say probably 80 to 90% of the tertiary squat days I have are ascending sets with clients right now.
Yeah, I cap a lot of those days too, to specific intensities that I don't want it to crest too high from. Yeah, I mean, literally, I'll write 5 or 6 RP across the whole block. I don't, it's not meant to be challenging anyway, but just to kind of touch on the male female thing, I also find that females are just better squatters in general. Men are more hinge dominant and, a little bit more pitched, and it taxes the lower back a lot more. And so it's they're a lot more sensitive to stuff like that. Whereas I think females can handle, I think the females could handle the 3X a lot more comfortably than a male could. So,
yeah.
But that's, again, starting point. It's all context at that point. So, sorry.
Yeah, for me on that third day is the same thing. If it's not ascending sets, it's usually just like 2 to 3 straight sets with assigned load. I have a BRP base oftentimes because I just don't want to risk them being like, oh, I'm feeling good on this tertiary. Yeah. Oh, this was an RP6, so I just give them assigned loads. And as far as variation, like Steve said, it just comes down to the individual. For what I do find is if, like, let's say their primary squats and their secondary squat days are close variant, whether it's secondary comp squats or pause squats, tempo, something like that, then I usually let that tertiary day be a little bit further in variation, maybe like a high bar, SB, something like that. Whereas if we're pushing some type of variation on their secondary day, then I have that third day be more comp specific, just to kind of grease the groove, if you will, whether it's like light tempo squats, pause squats, or even just light comp squats for higher reps. And yeah, I found that too as well, as far as like females versus males in terms of their ability to recover from 3 times squatting a week. And of course, there's exceptions to that too. But yeah, and once again, I even get to a point where I ask myself sometimes, like, okay, we've been doing this because it gives them like that extra practice or whatever it may be, which is great. But I've gotten away from using that day as just extra like volume stimulus, because at that point, once again, it's like, okay, I can just put a belt squat here or a hack, press something of that nature. So that's the big thing too, because there are some people where they just do need that additional volume stimulus. But I'm always going to be like, okay, can I get that from an accessory first? And if for whatever reason I can, it's just not specific enough for them, then that's when I'll maybe have it be like, okay, like a 3x6 or like a 2x8 with super light loads, just to get that additional stimulus there.
Yeah, and the question too was asking. We all went. I started by going more towards what the third day looks like. It says, "What does a 3-day week squat layout look like?" The other 2 days look like a 2-day squat workout, and then you're just adding a third day. Like I don't change anything about those other 2 days when I add in a third day. Those other 2 days are the same no matter what. So, all right. I think we'll do 2 more questions. This one's a little tough one. And you might have to think about it. Marcellus, most unexpected coaching lesson you learned?
Wow. Most unexpected lesson.
I'll lead it off. I don't know if this is most unexpected because there might be more unexpected ones than this, but something that I'll say that like as a beginner coach and now to where I'm at now that has greatly changed is I definitely thought coaching elite level people was different than coaching beginners or like intermediate lifters. I thought like it was entirely different and it must be this like this thing that like once you know how to do that, like it's just so much different. And it's literally not different at all. Other than the fact that most elite level lifters tend to be a little bit more dedicated, like they're elite for a reason. I think on the grand scheme of things, they tend to be a little bit more dedicated and control and track variables, which means what you do for them, you can have direct feedback on if it works or not, versus I would say on the more beginner spectrum, you've got people who are more inconsistent on their training days and skipping workouts on their sleep and nutrition and all that kind of stuff to where like big question marks of, is this even working or why is this working? Or like, I have no idea. Where elite level lifters, I almost would say sometimes it's easier to coach them. I don't know if you all agree. Like, I almost think a lot of times with most of my elite level people, it's easier to coach them because I know if X, Y, and Z is working, it's for the reasons I think it's working. Or if it's not working, it's for it. I can figure it out. Versus if you have, I don't want to say all beginners are not as serious, but usually beginners and intermediates tend to not be as consistent and invested to an extent. And that's where there's a bit more inconsistencies on knowing, like, is it the program, is it my coaching, or is it life variables? So
I can think of one as just generalized as a coach. I remember when I first decided like this was something I wanted to do, it looked like before I even got into it, like years ahead of time. And it's like, wow, this looks like it's such a cool job. Like you can like, you're working at home, everything's so flexible. You just spend all this time, you can go work out and like on your own schedule and, relax and, you're coaching, right? It's such a cool thing. Holy shit. Like, I feel like, obviously structuring time for, downtime and all that kind of stuff. But as a coach, I feel like I'm constantly wanting, like success for athletes. And it's like putting that and like the time, like we were talking about, I don't know if it was before the call or whatever, but like, pulling up the program and looking at their program, looking at their numbers to be able to talk to them, about what they should do. Like that's the amount of effort and work that we put into our coaching is just so beyond what I thought it was. Like, I guess like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, it's just such a different thought process from that. That's the only thing. It's just the grand scheme of things of how it, got to here was unexpected from what I thought 9 years ago. So,
yeah, I think I've got my answer now. Kind of two. So the first thing I'll say is, and this is more so like if you're a coach, you're also a lifter yourself, is like, your clients look to you to teach them all these different things, help progress, stuff like that. I have made so much progress in my own training from learning things from my clients, in the sense of you try so many different things with them through trial and error, and whether that stuff works for them or not, it gives you things to reference for yourself as well. So that was one thing for me that was very unexpected. Like I look at some of the changes I made in my own training and realize like, oh yeah, I'm doing it because I did this with I did this with Bob and Elisha and it worked well. And I think, oh, this makes sense for me. But I think probably a big one is like that, at least for me, when I first got involved in it, was like, and a lot of people might get kind of mad at this. I'm not by any means saying that like, you shouldn't go see a professional therapist, but dude, coaching is so much like being a therapist sometimes. Like, I think I really didn't understand to the degree of like how much someone's lifestyle and life factors really are involved with it. Like at this point, obviously, I know that that's a big part of like kind of how my coaching works. But when I first got involved in it, you think it's going to be something as simple as like, oh, you give people the program, they're going to follow the program, you're going to teach them technique, they're going to get stronger. And when you start to really get deeper into like, you get to know your clients better and the different stuff, what the stuff outside the gym that impacts the training, impacts the stress levels, and realizing like how much you have to really know about that stuff and be involved in it. And really how, I guess it's like what's unexpected is how much trust a client really has to have in their coach to really maximize everything. Because if your client's not comfortable talking about certain things, there's going to be so many factors of recovery and variables that you can't even account for if you don't know those different lifestyle stressors going on. So that was definitely something for me where I'm like, I now fully understand the importance of that. And I like even kind of preach that from the first consultation call, the importance of, hey, if you need to talk to me about anything, like you can, especially if it relates to things that will impact your training. But when I first started, I never thought it would be like to that deep level, like as far as like the role it can play.
All right. Since I ended up going first on that one, Marcel, so I'll make you go first on this one. This will be our last one. Because I already know part of your answer here, because I really like your answer to this one, is how do you train a client to use RPE if they consistently overshoot? And do you give a range to dial it back?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what I like to do is exactly that. I like to use ranges. So pretty much after, working with the client for a little bit, getting a little bit of data, I set like, a low end and high end, meaning like, hey, no matter what, unless something crazy happens, this should be the number you're able to hit around this RPE threshold on the lower end. And no matter how good you're feeling, I don't want you to go higher than this. So that's one thing I like to do. Something else that I like to do sometimes is give people just assigned loads and with those assigned loads, have them gauge, hey, what do you think this felt RPE wise? Even with their accessory work, I have them track their RPEs as well. And that's a tool that I found works really, really well. It's like just give them assigned loads and have them like do that consistently while kind of like gauging what they think the RPE is. And as they get better at that, you can kind of give them more free reign with that. And even then, no matter what, even like most like advanced lifters, I love using ranges when it comes to like the RPE. It's just that little bit of insurance that they're not going to go beyond kind of where they should be from an objective load perspective.
Yep. To go along, I'll say one thing before is that like I love ranges. I use them with most everyone, but there actually are, I don't know if you all have some people. I do have some athletes that don't like to be constrained, but they are very, very good with their RPEs. They like to have a little bit more control of their decision. Even though it's probably in the same range I give, they just don't like being constrained. So some athletes I don't give that for the reason that they actually like to feel like they have a little bit more control over their training. And since they are very responsible within it, I don't give them ranges, just kind of give them an RPE and let them go with it. But within that too, one, it could be percentage based in the first couple weeks of a block to RPEs later in the block. That's one thing. It could be RPE top sets and percentage based back downs. I think that was what you're partially alluding to there, Marcel. But the thing I'll kind of add is overshooting's not bad. That can be a good trait for some people because undershooting is just as bad as overshooting, and you have people that are chronic undershooters too. So I think on a lifter psychology way, if I have someone who's just a chronic overshooter, I have to understand why. And it's because in some manner, their reward system, that is what they feel, they feel reward from being able to push to a certain intensity and like being able to really kind of force things. So it's setting up expectations for the block for them is maybe those lifters, I'm pushing to RPE 9 more so at the end of a block, because I know if I don't do that, they're going to feel like they just had something there and they didn't really get that reward from the block. So there's someone I'm going to set up a little bit longer progression model in the block to know I'm going to start out lighter and we're going to make bigger jumps because we're going to push RPE 9 by the end of the block. That's also someone I'm going to be probably very explanatory in like a block overview of what we're trying to accomplish on certain days. I'll let them know, hey, this is the day and this is the weeks. I want you to go ham on this exact set. This is the day that I need you to hold back for me. If you do that for me, I promise I'm going to unleash you here, and let them know when they're going to get that reward. And if they do, you usually won't have too much of an issue. I honestly think people who are chronic overshooters, it's almost more on the coach for not setting up the training in a manner that creates a system that rewards them and constrains them correctly, because it's not too hard if you do it correctly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a fantastic approach. I used to like encourage, like if I know a few years ago, I would be like, hey, if you overshoot, fantastic. Like, hey, you hit a PR, you felt good that day. Fantastic. We can give us, some good, good insight in, what you're feeling. And obviously, this is a little bit before I got really into the analytics and stuff like that. But I mean, in terms of like overshooters and stuff like that, obviously I'm going to try to talk to them and rope them in, understand why they're doing what they're doing, or show them the perspective of things. Because a lot of times it's purely psychological. It's like, hey, I saw so and so do this today. Like, I think I can do that. Like, okay, great, that's awesome, but that's their journey, not yours. So there's the level of like competition, and then competition with ourselves, and obviously rate of progress. I feel like I've been harping on that a lot lately with clients. Is just like your rate of progress is important, and we want to uphold that across things. But if you're starting to like overshoot and things like that, we need to rope it in to make sure that you're not doing that. And obviously, you guys have talked about a variety of ways of doing that, which I fantastically agree with. I think those are all valid ways of doing it. I'm just going to straight up say, hey, look, you got to get your shit together. Like, keep it within that range, or keep it, in check, and we can extract as much as we possibly can. We can rinse and repeat on the block, like to give you more, like, since it's clearly working, I'm not going to slow you down. But, getting it together for sure. But, undershooting too is like you said, is not great either. So maybe even, AMRAPs to give them a scale for rep work, percentage based, and kind of pushing a progression if they're undershooting, are all great ways of kind of teaching that. And obviously asking them, what was the RP, right? Put it down so that I understand your scale, right? Because everybody's RP scale is slightly different. So
I think one reason overshoot gets a bad rap is the definition gets muddied with going off program.
yes,
Those are not the same thing. Overshooting and going off program are two completely different things. Overshooting, a lot of times, is maybe a bad decision, but it was an honest bad decision. Going off program is a dishonest bad decision. And how I program for those people is I refer them to a new coach.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It is funny, like, I'll have clients who really send a video and they'll apologize, but hey, coach, I'm sorry for overshooting based on the last warm up. I thought this was the right call. And you watch the last warm up and it's like, yeah, I see why you thought that was the right call. It's very different than you had a top set of 3 at RP6 and you decided to, like, hit a YOLO single or something like that.
yeah. I had a client that messaged me yesterday, and they'll know when who I'm talking about the second they see this video. But they're like, yeah, I wanted to jump like 20 kg to like from it. They were doing I think like a 7 and an 8 RP ascending work, and then a back down. And they're like, I went 20 kg. Last week they went like, I think 15. And they were like, yeah, I knew it was going to be an overshoot or even possible failure. I failed. And they were honest about it. They, obviously apologized and all that kind of stuff. But like, it's out of character for that person. So it's, whatever, not a big deal. Like we can dial that back in easily. But it's the more chronic ones that, like Steve said, you got to kind of rope them in or do something to reward, constrain them, or fantastic way of looking at it. So yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for Marcellus and Brad being able to kind of collaborate and do this together. Again, if you have any interest in signing up for the Corrupted Summit, make sure to visit that link below, as well as make sure to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, share it if some good information was presented, and you want to be able to kind of expand the knowledge of some of your friends as well. But otherwise, I will be talking to you all soon. Peace.